Hey everybody, welcome back to Bulletproof Selling. I'm Sean Rhodes. I'm the Chief Sales Architect and author of Bulletproof Selling. And here at Bulletproof Selling, we believe that hope is not a sales strategy. So we're here to increase the performance of salespeople and, of course, the results of their teams. So this live stream that we have, this podcast series, it actually shares insights from the top minds in sales, not only from best-selling authors, trainers, and those out there that are, speaking on stages, but hey, the people that are in the field managing teams, just like my guest is today. And so our commitment, every one of these episodes, every one of these podcasts, we're going to generate a sales process, a system that you'll be able to use no matter the size of your team or the size of your goals. So it is my extreme pleasure today to be able to introduce a guy who we're going to have a lot of fun chatting with because he thinks a lot about process, a lot about systems, a lot about how to get better results out of his team. Jeremy Krug, he's with what's considered a Motorola service provider, so an MSS. I got to meet him through the work that I was doing with a couple different Motorola associations. And Jeremy, love for you to introduce yourself, my friend. Talk a little bit about your team, your role in the sales world, and then we're going to dive into how you get to leverage your CRM in a lot of different cool ways. I'm very excited to be sharing with what you got going on today. So welcome to the show, Jeremy.
Sure, it's a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to having some discussions about how we do sales in this world today.
I love it. I love it. So talk to me about the company you work for, the number of people that you're managing, because we got a lot of sales leaders tuning into this live stream and podcast. And I want to
Sure,
let them know that, hey, you're right there with them with all the challenges that
sure,
salespeople have been facing.
absolutely. So here at Communications Electronics, we focus, as you mentioned, on Motorola sales. We also focus on in-building solutions. So we have a lot of customers where we bring both Motorola and two-way radio coverage inside of buildings, both for their UHF radios as well as their public safety needs that they have to satisfy jurisdictional requirements, as well as cellular. So think AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile.
Sure.
So there are facilities that need that coverage, and we bring that in as well. So I'm focused directly on the in-building side. So I manage a team of 4 where we're out, managing customers and relationships and prospecting to bring sales into the organization where we can put in building solutions in facilities in the area.
And one of the things that you and I got to chat about in a couple of different conversations that we've had prior to being able to hop on live today was about how you understood at a very early point in your sales career that you could not keep all the information that you needed to do your job successfully in your head. It had to live outside
Sure.
of your head somewhere else. So talk to me a little bit about the idea you have about how your salespeople are required to not only use a CRM, but are actually required to drive conversation with it and help deliver client projects with it, which is something that a lot of salespeople, they're very reticent about their CRMs anyway, but they don't even realize the capacity that a lot of these systems have for being able to actually help deliver great client experiences. So let's dial back a couple of years, to when you
Sure.
first became a leader in the sales industry. What was your feeling about a CRM at the time? Did you always love them, or were you at the point where you just realized, hey, I'm being required to use it and I'm going to get fired if I don't, so I better learn how? Talk to us a little
Yeah.
bit about that relationship.
Yeah, so I know my own experience when we first, as a salesperson, we had Salesforce, several years ago, and I read just liking the order of things. I knew that there was some value to it, but the way that we used it, I knew probably wasn't the most efficient way that we used it, and didn't have buy-in all the way through the organization of how we could continually leverage it. Um,
Mm,
as I got into more of a leadership role and had a larger view of the business, it became abundantly clear how we could use this as a tool, just like a saw or a hammer, how we could use this thing to be more efficient. And it really, our sales team, as we've started to use it, and we laugh internally frequently that it's crawl, walk, run. So we
ah,
today we use HubSpot. Many of you are
mhm,
probably familiar with that. Has some good marketing facility in there as well. So
mhm.
the team has actually been very engaged and has really realized, it's almost like a secretary in some regard, right? In managing your
Mhm.
contact, your follow up, and we've really done what I think is a good job in squeezing the most out of it so far. So today. When we first started out with HubSpot, we really used it to manage the opportunities that we had that needed to be quoted. And then as those deals turned from quoted deals in the pipeline to actual backlog and we had POs come through, we really figured out how to use that as a workflow management system. So today, sales folks, they have an opportunity, they bring it in. As a group twice a week, we actually review the list of deals that have come in, make sure that we understand the quoting requirements, and then it goes to our quoting team. Our quoting team then works on the quotes. They move it over to a quoted to sales stage. The sales team gets an alert. Okay, I know my quote is ready internally. They prepare the proposal, send it to the customer, and it goes into a proposal submitted stage. Then as those deals become, we get POs or they get awarded verbal, they move further to the right. And eventually when that PO comes in, our finance team then gets an alert. Hey, we need to make sure the PO matches. We have, we have credit run on these folks, that they're good risk, and have them set up and onboarded in our system. And then from that point, it goes right over to our project delivery team. So the project manager picks it up, uses it to schedule a project kickoff meeting, tracks it through delivery. And then we actually then, when the project is over, it goes into a closeout review. So then the finance team picks it back up when we have our monthly project closeout review, and we can review the P&L of the project, identify any lessons learned. It's all the way through. If the project goes into maintenance, it goes into maintenance, and we have a sleeve there where we manage that maintenance effort. So really the workflow has been extremely helpful, just being efficient of getting projects in and out, so we can provide a high level of service to our customer. Then from the sales standpoint, managing it through, as we look at that pipeline piece, any conversations that our folks have with the customer, very easy to document those emails, make a note with regard to follow-up, set tasks. And that's really where in our crawl, walk, run evolution of how we use this tool, where we're really figuring out how we can more sharply manage our commitments to our customers, following up on those accounts so they don't become orphan accounts. So that's really where we are today and how we've used it.
I love it. So you figured out how to use your CRM for not only the very initial stages of prospecting, but all the way through outreach, driving sales meetings, quoting, and not just from the salesperson's perspective. A lot of salespeople probably use their CRM at some aspect to manage maybe the flow of a customer life cycle, but you've actually figured out how to integrate your CRM into your company's operations, so that if I need to hand it off to quoting, I can do that. I need to hand it off to operations or to delivery. And that way everybody has a view of that client account held in one space, not disparate pieces of data spread across somebody's, a folder in one computer and an email account in another computer. It's all in one place. I love the fact that you've been able to do that. And so a lot of sales leaders are thinking, well, Jeremy, that sounds awesome, buddy, but my salespeople are still struggling to even put in basic data into their CRMs. I have to force them to just enter the fact they made a call into the CRM. And I'm talking with sales leaders across industries right now. It's exactly what they're struggling with. And so there's, the carrot and the stick method of managing salespeople. I can either beat them and get them to do it, which is something that we're very used to in the military. You will, beatings will continue until morale improves. But salespeople are really not motivated well in that aspect, I've discovered. So how do you create the carrot, so to speak, in that if you were bringing on a new salesperson, how would you encourage them to begin learning to use your CRM in this kind of, cradle to grave, cycle through a client's life cycle, and to get them to want to begin sharing it with other parts of your company, quoting, service delivery, everything like that? How would you guide a new salesperson into integrating all of this great stuff you've got going on in your CRM?
In our world, it's real easy because it's woven into our process. So you will not get a quote unless it goes into that system. I mean, it's that simple. So we have it woven through virtually every part of our process, and it just is second instinct. And the nice thing is, or one of the great things is now the team, they're finding ways that as a sales management group, we've not realized how to leverage, where they're like, hey, look, you know what? I don't know if you realize this, but if you do this, we can add a little bit more efficiency in this. So we're kind of to that level where it's there to make their life easy, to get what they want and what they need to service our customers. So again, not real difficult in that respect. Again, because it's woven in the process. And I would just add too, and I think some of the other sales folks maybe listening in today might relate, but what we've been able to do too is when it goes into that pipeline stage, we put a indicator of when we think the dollars will get invoiced and how,
Sure.
what the value of that is. And then we do have a rating on the job or the project, the chance of close, whether it's 90%. We have criteria around that, of course. And then
Yep.
that feeds a dashboard. At any time, we can go into our pipeline by rep, by buying segment, by customer, and we can see a factored pipeline of how much we have, and look at our goals and our targets for the year and figure out, in advance where those gaps are. So, geez, we're not 3 months away from the fiscal year and caught by surprise because, we're off track. We're able to use that, pretty actively. So
it's used as a way to both direct strategy, large, engagement. I need, if you're managing 4 reps and you could tell they're under number by a certain time in the year from those leading indicators, calls out, proposals out, however that might look, then at a strategic level, I need to allocate resources here. And you've also been able to figure out how to use this resources at a tactical level, in that it's where the deal stages live. I can enter data there, it pulls emails in automatically. So if we're looking at the challenges that you see a lot of salespeople have in your industry with using a CRM at even the basic level, let's remove the operational piece out of this, because that's like gravy or icing on the cake, so to speak. Let's just talk about using a CRM to help us manage sales. In your industry, where do you see a lot of salespeople struggle with beginning to understand the power that this software platform could have?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge that I see is where folks think that it's just double work, or they're not doing it for their own benefit, or they're doing it for some other reason that they don't have a lot of confidence in that above them. And I think when we work together as a team, and I think where we are today, and we're really working to refine that, is we collaborate together to figure out, okay, this is our standard that we've defined of how we manage an account, how we prospect, here's how we think we can leverage this tool. And we sit down as a team and say, okay, does this make sense? Does this pass the smell test? And it's a agreement among all of us. Okay, yes, we agree that this is going to make our life easier. Just one of the sales guys and I were having a conversation earlier in the week. It's almost like having a secretary, right, to manage your contact, and to be a sales professional, just like any other professional, a doctor or an attorney. You have these things in place to help you, meet your commitments and deliver your product to customer. This is no different. This is a tool to help us be professionals and do it at a high level.
And obviously the client never sees the back end system that you have. And I know from all the clients that we've worked with, the one thing that we hear is, Sean, what you've stood up for us, allowing us to use a CRM like a secretary. The one thing that we hear from our end users is persistence. That's the word that comes up over and over and over. And they think it's because, we as salespeople are just, trying to figure out different ways to add value to their lives every day. Like, we're just sitting there with a whiteboard thinking, I really need to get a hold of Jim Smith today. What value am I going to add to his life? Because that's all that Jim Smith, sees. He sees the email come in, he gets the phone call, he gets the social media message. And obviously we're trying to provide value every step of the way. Jim's like, wow, these guys are really, trying to, just do me a solid, right? It's not like, buy from me. It's how can I help you? Here's something I found that you might find interesting. And Jim thinks that that's an incredibly targeted effort, where really, we use a CRM to do that at scale. And so persistence is something that we can actually build into that secretary function of a CRM. So let's talk a little bit about that, because a lot of people, they think, my CRM is only for account notes, and they don't understand the power it can actually have in helping us drive prospect outreach and cadence. So how do you structure your CRM to help your salespeople prospect? Do you load cadence campaigns in there? Do you just use it to be able to say how many calls did you make, and more lagging indicator stuff? Talk to us a little bit at the tactical level of how you help your salespeople help themselves by using their CRM.
So I'll be honest, that's an area where we're just in our early stages of development and figuring out how we can leverage the tool. Our first priorities were managing the opportunities, and then start managing the follow-up to existing counts that we had. And now we're at that stage where we're looking, where we're using it and constantly refining ways to use it for prospecting. So today, we do line up our activities that we have. They report to a dashboard. We can see how often we followed up. If there's any open items where we've not followed up, where we've committed to following up. Those agreements that we have with our customers and what that follow-up cadence looks like. And to your point, it's not just driving, hey, sell. It's building a relationship. It's finding ways to have touch points where we can, share the value that we have, and understanding what their needs are, so we can fine tune that value that we offer. But again, just using the system to track that activity, and ensure that we're meeting the commitments that we've agreed to among ourselves is really. So we've done several campaigns through email, and certainly your book, you have some good ways that we're looking to figure out how we can exploit and do a better job at running campaigns through the CRM. So we know that it's there. We've done a few, but we know that we have a lot of opportunity to improve.
And so let's talk about the setup of a pipeline inside a CRM, because that's a conversation that you and I have already had, and I know you've at least gotten that far within the setup. And then we'll dive in. I think the system we're going to build today are going to be, how do you stand up a campaign inside a CRM, which is going to be a lot of fun. And we'll get to that in just a second, and we're going to have a cool time talking about that. So when you stand up a pipeline inside of a CRM, the way that our clients have seen that done well with us is we say, all right, let's map out the buying cycle, prospecting wise, of a client. And so that might look like, they haven't heard of us. We know just enough about them to know they might be qualified, like they might buy what we have. So that would be like a cold outreach stage. How have you stood up your pipeline to delineate the different places that a prospect might be inside of their buying cycle?
So we've had some agreement as to the designation of what those customers are, whether they're dormant, whether they're active, whether they're buyers, whether they're prospects. And when we create that company in the system, and then the individuals within that company, we make that designation. So we have a agreed upon follow-up schedule and how we track those. And then as we make determinations as to whether they really are prospects, or whether they're influencers, or flat out, whether they're just not somebody who we can help, we make that designation.
Some prospects are not worth the outreach. They really aren't.
Right. In some cases, they just don't buy what we sell, and there's not a opportunity that we see where that's going to happen. And by the way, it doesn't mean that they're still not valuable folks to continue to follow up with. It's certainly not at a prospect level. So again, we have those designations in our system, and as we manage our prospect list, we filter those in or out in our outreach.
Love it. And so let's talk about the system then, because a lot of people are at the point where they understand the difference between leads, prospects. They've got people that might buy from them. They got people that are probably going to buy from them if they show up at the right time with the right offer. And so there's all these prospects kind of floating out there in the ether, so to speak. And you believe it or not, a lot of companies, for the salespeople that don't have a CRM, and I'm sure that this makes your ears bleed like it does mine, they manage all this on a spreadsheet. That I cannot wrap my head around, because it's good that you know where all your prospects are. That's better than trying to remember them. But it's almost impossible to run the type of statistical analysis and campaigns and everything that we know make salespeople successful, that allow us to turn a CRM into a secretary, so that I can just be present. So there's this great thing that we've discovered called the innovation quotient, and I think you're going to get a kick out of this. So if you think of like a graph with an XY axis, right, just a 90-degree graph with a line going straight up vertically from the left to the right. What we've discovered is that to really bring it home, the ability to innovate in a sales process is directly proportional to how much energy you don't have to focus on with everything else going on in your brain, like tasks, outreach, who's the next phone call, what happened in the last conversation I had with them 3 months ago. If I'm trying to remember all of these details, my ability to innovate drops dramatically, right? And so the idea is that if I can have a system handle all of the foundational elements of my sales process for me, like who I'm reaching out to next, what that message is supposed to contain, what we said during our last conversation, that allows me to be fully present. Because we both know every sale requires something a little different, because every prospect is a little different. They might fit inside of a process, but there's going to be twists and turns in that road. I guarantee every single sale has them. And I need to be present as a salesperson to pay attention to that, rather than trying to remember we talked 3 months ago, what was the number they gave me? Are they qualified for budget? Who was the last person they bought from? All the things that could float through our mind as salespeople. So when we talk about standing up a campaign, then the idea is let's take all the foundational elements and get them out of our heads so that our salespeople can be fully present with their prospects. So let's build a system, okay? We're going to talk about a basic methodology. We're going to talk about trimming sales down to its basic minimums here. So we're going to trim hope away from our sales strategy. And that, let's actually rely on a process, which I know you and I see very much the same way. Process is how it has to happen. So when we talk about trimming hope, it's a basic acronym, TRIM, trim, okay? The first element of standing up a great process is the trigger. So if we're going to talk about standing up a campaign, the trigger for this, I'm going to give you an idea of what I think it might be, but I want to know how it would apply to your folks. The trigger for this might be I've recognized a new vertical inside of my pipeline and that I need a campaign to handle that function. And it might be a new prospect, it might be an existing buyer, a decision maker, something along those lines. But now this vertical has been identified. And this is great if you're either in the early stages of standing up a CRM or like you've been using it for a while, but you came across there's this whole new vertical of business we discovered we could do great at. I need a campaign there to facilitate prospecting. So what would the trigger be for your folks in standing up a new campaign?
We actually had one recently. It's funny you mentioned that, and that all makes good sense. So we had a new product hit the market maybe a year and a half or so ago that we really felt confident that addressed a part of the marketplace given in size of an organization or size of a venue that previously we didn't have a economical solution for. Just to give you an illustration, so let's say a 20,000 square foot space that needed to have AT&T coverage in, for example. Well, 4 years ago, that might have cost $1 or $2 a square foot to put in, and now we have a solution that maybe is 50 cents a square foot.
Wow.
And,
okay. Great. So you want to get into that market.
Exactly. It was cost prohibitive for them in the past, but now, so enter, here's a trigger that we need to stand up a campaign for. So that's, I can totally relate to what you're talking about.
Love it. All right. So I've identified a new market vertical, which is a great trigger to stand up a new campaign in. And for a lot of salespeople, it's just recognizing I don't have any campaigns. So whatever the prospect I deal with the most, that's the vertical I need to stand up. So it's perfect. So now we have a trigger. The second element to this is making it repeatable. That's the R in the TRIM acronym. And so a campaign by its nature are the same series of steps executed at about the same cadence across this campaign. So whether you're dealing with Jim Smith, one of your salespeople, or Sally Jane, another salesperson, could be separated by geography, but they're all targeting the same prospect base for this new vertical. And so how would you advise your salespeople make a campaign repeatable? Given the fact that you just stood one up, I'd love to find out how you did it. How do you make sure they execute the same steps on this campaign in the same order?
Yeah, that's a great question. And in our case, and I think consistency, back to our both of our affection for process, consistency is another piece that is really important, that if they deal with me or you or Bob or Joe, it's the same experience when they deal with our company. But back to the campaign, in our case, we actually chose to do it via email. So we had an email campaign. We ran it through our CRM. We had built a list of customers in our geography that fit that venue size that we thought that we could help. And then we had a calculated campaign that was just via email. We actually didn't have the reps prospect individually in this case, although certainly that could have been an alternative. But we sent out the email. We had sequences set up through the CRM where they follow up, and we got prompt attention by the sales team when we had a response. But that's how we did it in our case. Looking back on it and how successful it was, we probably could have threaded some prospecting individually in there that might have returned some more value for us. But it was successful, I would say, in general, running it through the email. And that was the first one, frankly, that we had done through our CRM that way. So we always learn a little more and find some ways and get feedback from folks like yourself, how we can make that a little sharper next time.
And so that's actually, I'm glad you mentioned that, man. We're just leading right into it. This was not a
Yeah.
scripted conversation, by the way, but I love the way that it's flowing. So we've got the trigger, we've got making it repeatable, and it's the same series of steps. Now let's talk about making it improvable. So we've discovered that there are actually 3 M's to a good campaign. And the 3 M's are movement, they are method, and they are message. And so let's dig into each of those, because this is how we make this thing improvable. So movement is, I need to know from each campaign, what is the goal that I'm trying to achieve with that account? Where is it moving inside of my pipeline or the next place in its sales cycle? So if I don't know anything about this prospect, maybe the first movement it needs to go to is, who's the decision maker? And maybe that moves it into a different vertical or a different campaign. Maybe the movement is, I need to ascertain budget. Are they qualified, and at what level? Because as I'm sure your company does, I could sell you something that's a solution, but there's the Rolls-Royce version and there's the Honda Accord version, right? Which is great. Both will get the job done. It's what kind of style do you want to travel in? And so, for budget, I need to know, are you in this range or in this range? So that could help ascertain movement, but I need to make sure that everything inside of my campaign is designed so that it's driving towards movement forward. Because otherwise we're just having a conversation, which is great, but hopefully it leads somewhere good for both of us. So movement is the first piece. The second one that I mentioned is the method. And so you chose a campaign that was entirely email based. And those are great, especially if we're working at volume, right? I've got 10,000 prospects. I can send an email campaign out. I'm going to get a certain percentage response rate, and we can move forward from there, any inquiries that come in. Another great thing that you can do with method, and this is for all the sales leaders out there, is to mix it up. Maybe the first step is an email. Maybe the second step is a social media message. Maybe you incorporate video in that message. And obviously this is targeted more to singular prospects. Maybe you pick up the phone for the next method of outreach. And you could do that over a 9, a 12-step, a 24-step campaign that could last 8 weeks. It could last a quarter. It could last a year. Just depends on what the buying cycle is and how many touches you think a prospect needs in order to get into a conversation. So we've covered the movement. Where does this thing need to go? We've covered the actual method. Am I using phone, email, LinkedIn, and in what order, and how many days apart for each of them? And the final one is message. And this is something that I'd love to get your insight on, especially as it applies to your industry, and that I need to make sure that when I'm reaching out, I'm not just saying, hey, will you buy my stuff? Because I could do that via phone, email, LinkedIn, but if my only message is buy my stuff, or here's my calendar link, book an appointment for yourself, knowing nothing about me and the value I have to provide, I'm probably not going to get that big of a return. So as you look at reaching out, even with these emails, how do you make sure that you're offering value to your prospects each step of the way?
Yeah. So in our case, and there's some nuance to this because now we're in a pandemic situation and folks aren't in the office perhaps as much as they were. But in our case, it was, hey, we had plenty of customers where mobile devices did not work inside the building, and it was problematic in how they did business. Hey, if I have
it's a
a
safety risk these days. Yeah,
no question. So that's really where the call to action is, hey, do your mobile devices not work adequately in your building? Pretty simple question. So that in and of itself drove, getting to the right audience, the right decision maker within the organization who was qualified to raise their hand and say, yes, that's a problem and I can do something about it. And then was our call to action through the email. And then,
love it.
Varying responses was, drove our follow-up back to those folks.
No, that's beautiful. And so you've got the trigger for it. We know how to make it repeatable. It lives outside of our heads, inside of a CRM, inside of a campaign. It's improvable, in that I know I'm going to be standing up, methods and movements, and I'm getting elements in place here. So this campaign isn't just a conversation, that it actually adds value and drives a decision with the messaging. So the final piece of trim now is measurable. So how do you know at the tail end of a campaign, did it work? Did it not? Where can I improve this thing in the future? How do I measure success as it applies to an outreach campaign?
Yeah, so I'd be curious what your perspective is on how you would measure a successful campaign. In our case, we knew how many emails we had sent or how many prospects we had sent them to. We had a response rate, obviously, simple arithmetic. And then how many of those responses were, what we'd call qualified, where we had an opportunity to quote, and then, how many of those turned into actual sales. And frankly, in our case, this bled into pandemic. So our response rate, I think, was tampered a
Oh
little
yeah,
bit tamped down because of having folks, the right folks, get it and focused on different things, and what was important wasn't important. Um, but
yeah,
really, that's
absolutely.
yeah. So that was what our measurement was. But I'd be curious in your experience, from my own selfish
Sure.
inquiry, what
No,
in a
that's why we're here,
campaign
man.
like that, what does that response look like in your mind that you say, okay, if it's
How
two
do you do it?
percent or five
Yeah.
percent,
How do you measure it? Yeah. So it really depends on if we're looking at two different ways to measure any system's effect. Okay. And the first way to measure is one, was it adhered to? And obviously, when we're talking about campaigns and people hearing this might be like, Sean, well, that works really great in the military when you just tell a bunch of, men and women to go charge down the field. But in a sales team, I need to have my salespeople's buy-in to run something like this because it's really their revenue on the line. It's their commissions. And
mm-hmm.
so when we talk about this, let's understate it by saying you can absolutely involve your salespeople, and you should, in standing up these verticals in your pipeline, delineating where someone is in their buying stages by vertical, and telling what's working and what's not in getting a prospect's attention in our industry. Maybe you're in an industry where email is the best way. Maybe you're in an industry where email just goes to spam, or it's, no one really responds to it. So maybe your salespeople say, Jeremy, phone, buddy, phone every single day, all day long, phone. Well, great. Now you need to know you need more phone steps inside of a campaign. And so in building this, make sure we involve our salespeople so they actually have buy into the process. And then the second piece is, one, adherence. Did they use the campaign? Because that's critical, right? If we look at, the end of a quarter's results and we say, we stood up this new campaign, but man, the numbers went down. What happened? Well, if nobody used the campaign, then we can't measure the campaign's success, so it's
Sure.
adherence. The second piece is, like you mentioned, what is our return rate? What's our response rate? How many sales did that drive? Maybe how many proposals did it drive out? How many proposals were generated out of the contacts that came in through that campaign? So there's a lot of different ways to measure that. And of course, that's going to be largely dependent on how many prospects did we target initially? What was our response rate below that? How many conversations did that drive? Just because somebody gets back to me, via email, hey, I like the message, man, tell me more, doesn't mean I'm going to have a conversation with them. I wish it did all the time. Doesn't, though, because there is a drop-off rate. And then finally, how many proposals or quotes or, whatever that method is inside of your business model went out the door. So to be able to work those numbers down will give you a clean
Mm-hmm.
metric on 10,000 prospects, 4 deals made at a total value of X, or whatever that might be as far as the tail end of it goes. But without adhering to the campaign, it does become very difficult to know, was the campaign successful? So
Sure.
from a sales leader's perspective, all the people listening, to really, check in on your folks through that 8-week process, get into their CRMs, the value of having a CRM, looking. A task came up for Bob to make a phone call as part of this campaign. Did he make a phone call around the day that the task triggered inside the system? If that phone call is outstanding by 3 weeks, Bob's not following the campaign. And that's,
Yeah.
more of a coaching thing rather than is the campaign broken? Because only by using it will we know, was it effective. So that is an amazing system. Thank you for helping us build that today. How do you
Yeah.
actually stand up a pipeline and get campaigns in there that actually drive process forward so that we can issue a quote, so that we can hand this customer over to the service or the delivery department of our business so they can get the quality that they came to us to receive. So this has been an amazing conversation. I know you and I could chat about process and systems all
Yep.
day, but
Yep.
we got organizations to run. So let's try to wrap it up a little bit here.
Yep. You
I
bet.
had a great love to know, sir, for people that want to know more about you, tell me a little bit about how they can learn more about you, your company, your business model. Where do they go to get more information about you?
Sure. Talkcei.com. So
Hmm.
that's, I'm so used to saying it. Forgive me if it's a little clunky, but talk Charlie Edward Isaac. You'll appreciate that from your
Yeah,
military
yeah, I love
background.
it.
But
Yep.
talkcei.com. And we have all of our products or services that we offer, from LMR to in building. And we also do some access control security, as well as some intelligent transportation system as well. So certainly check us out. Feel free to call me. My contact information is on there. And anybody at our organization would be more than glad to answer any questions or help in any way that we can.
That's super, sir. Well, thanks for joining us, and make sure
You
that for all
bet.
the listeners out there that you're following us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube for these live streams. And of course, check out the podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, anywhere that podcasts are found. And for more sales results, for more sales improvement to help you replace hope with strategy on your sales teams, make sure you're checking out the free resources and the sales assessment that we've just stood up absolutely free over at www.bulletproofselling.systems. Sean Rhodes here, joined by Jeremy Krug. It's been a pleasure serving the sales world today, Jeremy. Let's go out there and make selling bulletproof.
You bet. Thank you.